Good morning, everybody. I would like to start in about a minute. So, good morning, everybody. I would like to welcome you all to the Tech Talk session being conducted by Solution Buggy. And today we'll be looking at electronics and opportunities in this sector. Uh, I hope I'm audible to all of the participants. So what will we be covering in the next about 1 hour to 90 minutes is we'll have a look at the electronics and semiconductor industry as such. What are the challenges and opportunities that are presented in this sector? Basically, what are the growth drivers? And there is a very good policy called SPECS, which has come up right now. And the reason for the webinar is also to highlight the few points which SPECS has brought out, the government policy in terms of the electronic and semiconductor industry. And finally, look at even the semiconductor industry and what is the update that is happening in this sector. I have a key personality who will be joining us. Unfortunately, he got a little bit delayed, but he'll be joining us by in about 15 to 20 minutes. So before I start, a quick introduction to what we do at Solution Buggy. We are an online platform to connect the manufacturing industries with the experts. We are India's largest platform in the MSME sector. We have about 10,000 experts on the platform. And as on date, we have done almost about 3,500 plus consulting projects over the last 6 years. We are based out of Bangalore, but we are also having an office in the NCR region. When we say projects, it could be anything from a one-day consulting assignment, which is in the, for example, a training program, or it could be all the way from setting up right from a concept to a commercialization, including basic marketing, product, project report, machinery procurement, and supply chain management, sales and marketing, getting access to new markets. We work even with the existing industries and help them with new product development, or somebody wants to diversify into a new sector, then that also we look at it. And in terms of new entrepreneur, obviously, a lot of entrepreneurs come to us saying that, I have a budget in mind, I have a land in mind, what can I go for? So it's not a direct answer that we can give. Obviously, it needs to be well researched, well thought out process. And what we have seen is, as long as the entrepreneur also puts in his efforts in understanding the sector, it's win-win for both of us, and the project goes ahead. With regards to the electronic sector, some of the projects that we are doing is in the realm of smart appliances, passive component manufacturing, and also into electronic manufacturing services as such. One tidbit about the passive component manufacturing is, there is a huge demand in terms of, it could be as small as manufacturing of on PCB resistors, capacitors, transistors, kind of things. And this has got a huge demand, and also good policies which are there in the current government, and encouraging the entrepreneurs with the SPECS policy. So this is something that we will be talking about today also. I would like to first of all introduce myself now. I'm Guruprasad Bangle, director at Solution Buggy, and have about 20 plus years of experience in consulting space. I'm an engineer in electronics and communication and an MBA from IIM Bangalore. I have successfully exited my last startup. It was a venture which I sold to Magic Bricks in 2016. I had project management and new projects division at Solution Buggy. The person I have, whom I'm going to introduce, is Mr. 𝐔𝐧𝐥𝐬𝐬, who is CEO at 𝐴𝐵𝐴𝐵 Consulting Private Limited. He almost has about 30 years of experience. He was the MD at Arrow Electronics. Before that, he was the MD at PMC Sierra for about 5 years. He's been the chairman of the Indian Electronics and Semiconductor Association. Also been a country head at National Semiconductors, AMD, and Freescale Semiconductor. He has immense experience in setting up of India operations for most of the MNCs who in the chip manufacturing and also in the realm of consumer electronics as well. So I think the idea to get him here on the call is mainly to understand what the sector holds, and also in terms of what has changed in the government policies in the last, in the last 2 to 3 years, which has helped immensely in new entrepreneurs to take up this sector. So with that, I just want to pull up the PPT. Give me a second. I hope you are able to see my screen.
Yes.
Yes, we are.
Yeah. So as I was telling, the webinar is basically looking at electronics and semiconductors, which is obviously a very good growth opportunity that we are going to talk about. And like I said, we'll be giving a basic understanding of the industry as such. What are the challenges and opportunities? What kind of growth drivers we can look at? And in terms of policies, which Mr. Sanjeev will also be talking about, what these fixed policies holds, and what kind of semiconductor industry updates that we can look for. This is more of a very macro level understanding. But what we have gained in terms of for an entrepreneur to set up an industry if he's looking in the electronics sector is mainly that a lot of companies who are OEMs are moving into India in terms of like say companies like Samsung or even the analog devices, who basically are looking at components like ATS, which are basically packaging of these devices. and getting them from entrepreneurs here. And I would not say that these plants can be set up by anybody and everybody, but because there is a budget requirement also ranging upwards of 10 crores and above for any even of the smallest plant which we are looking at in terms of for the semiconductor industry. But having said that, there are areas like PCB. Again, when you look at PCB, China is a huge player, and most of the Indian OEMs are sourcing their requirements from China. But what can be done is anything above 7-layer or 14-layer kind of PCBs are being made in India in a few companies, and they are taking the, I would say, the first steps in getting into these sectors. Also, the 7-layer or 14-layer kind of PCBs have immense applications, not in high-end electronics, but in say some of the toys, and also in some of the low-end music systems. So these are some of the areas where there is a good opportunity. And again, I was talking about EMS also, electronic manufacturing services. That again presents a huge opportunity. As we go along, we will be having a more deeper look into that as well. So if you look at ESDM as such, which is the electronic systems design and manufacturing, obviously rosy numbers are being painted everywhere, and there is it's being shown as it's going to be a good opportunity. But like I said, unless there is a budgetary constraint of at least 10 crores and above, because some of these schemes are also pointed at that kind of investments. That is one thing. The second thing is also that you need to have good marketing channels in terms of getting orders from these OEMs. But that should not be much of an issue, having people like Sanjeev and people who have already been in the industry for a long time. As he joins, he will also explain a few intricacies in dealing with these OEMs and what are the key aspects that they are looking at. So this is something, again, most of us know about it, how India has been growing and what is the digital penetration that has been happening. And also what kind of, requirement is there. Some of the things which are already missing in this is the availability of 5G and what kind of, infrastructure requirement that also brings in. So these are some of the things that need to be looked at from an entrepreneur's perspective. So, as I was telling, a lot of opportunities in these key sectors where a lot of investment is also going in, and a lot of entrepreneurs can look into getting into these sectors where not only it's direct B2C marketing, which your companies like Boat and a lot of new players like 𝐒𝐻𝐸𝐻 and other consumer wearable devices electronics are getting into, but it is also in terms of what these players are looking at in terms of contract manufacturing, right? So for each Boat or each 𝐒𝐻𝐸𝐻 or each maybe company that comes in, being a small entrepreneur, there are at least about 15 to 16 OEMs who are supplying to these companies. So these are some of the key areas where a lot of demand obviously is there, and also in terms of a new sector which has also emerged is also in the design and efficiency of the electrical vehicles. So one of the entrepreneurs who has come to us has also we have worked on this is basically in the realm of battery recycling in terms of electronic vehicles, where he needs to recycle these batteries and use them for maybe for UPS and home installation. So these are some of the sectors that are coming up as well. If you look at total demand as of today, most of it is coming from the automotive sector, the infotainment, or it could be in the connected electronics, ICUs inside the engines, and also from the electric vehicles. So a lot of demand from that sector as well. As of today, very few players who are into this sector. The second is obviously consumer electronics. Dixon is a big name, which is already in the sector. But there are a lot of new players as well who are coming into the consumer electronics sector. An easy to enter sector, but the biggest issue is very low entry barriers. Lot of small sweatshops which are giving competition to these big players. So that is something that an entrepreneur will have to look at. Also, if you look at the investment range, because most of these components are not made in India, it's basically imported from other countries like China and Vietnam, and mainly the assembly happens here. Today, even if you look at most of the technology that a company like Boat or Maybe or anything has, it's mostly it's mostly on the assembly line itself. Uh, Next is obviously semiconductor. A lot of people are talking. A lot of big players coming in who are trying to enter. Unfortunately, the deals which we have seen in the last 6 months, which were there in the PR and media as well, have not gone into the stage where we expected it to be. Had it been so, then a lot of demand would have been there for new entrepreneurs to come in, and looking at budget ranges of 5 to 15 crores kind of setups, which can become tier 1, tier 2 vendors to these companies. But like I said, although government policies are in place, and a lot of impetus even from the local state governments, example like Gujarat and also Maharashtra as well to some extent, but this is not moved as expected, and obviously there are the big players who are doing a wait and watch kind of approach, right? Uh, so, obviously, there is a good policy which we were talking about, which is the production linked incentive, wherein, if you are looking at the semiconductor core design, or it could be in the SOPs, which is the system on chips. So there is still a good opportunity to get into it. Only ceiling there is that you are looking at an investment range which is upwards of 50 crores. So that is where the challenge is also, that people are not able to, there are not many big players who want to look at the sector as of now, because of the whatever we have heard with the Vedanta and Foxconn and the other large players who are still not very sure on how to approach the sector as of. But as you see on the screen, these are the kind of policies that have been kind of foreseen from the government. But how it goes ahead, it again depends on what the big players will look at. But once there is some progress in this, obviously there is a big opportunity in this sector as well. So if we look at the three big policies that the government is kind of proposing, is mainly in the for the semiconductor sector, is mainly in the design of the fabs. It could be the display fabs, basically the screens that we are looking at, the monitors or the large LED and LCD TVs. This is also something which players like Dixon and others are, betting largely on, where obviously the investments are very high, and it could again give lead to at least about 100 to 150 other small companies who can be, tier 1 and tier 2 vendors to the large companies. This is something that most of the not just the electronics segment, but also segment from the automotive and other things also are also focusing on. In terms of the ATMP and OSAT, it's basically the, like I said, packaging of these semiconductors. Malaysia is a huge player in this. In fact, half of the world's this one gets packaged there. And there have been a lot of interest from Malaysian companies also to look at India as one of the key players to look at the ATMP segment. But only concern there is, there is a huge requirement of not just money power, but also in terms of technical know-how, and that is where the ATMPs, Malaysia has taken almost about 17 to 18 years to get to the stage at which it is today, and it has the I would say the luxury of having so much of trained manpower. So for India to develop that, it would obviously take a long time, and although ATMP is a huge segment, there could be some packaging that could be moved to India, and this could be something like outsourcing to India. So this is something that again a few companies can look at, but again it is subject to how the interest from the private players from Malaysia is. But what we have heard, and also maybe when Mr. Sanjeev will be talking about, is how these ATMP as a segment will be growing into a huge opportunity. This is the specs policy, very briefly over here, but Mr. Sanjeev will present an entire presentation on this. So what specs is, it's a scheme for promotion of electronic components and semiconductors. Huge incentive to the tune of almost, here it says 25, but it's almost in some cases even 35% of capital expenditure is reimbursed back. Tenure has been recently extended. It was until I think until September 2023, but now it has been extended by another 6 months, so to until 31st March. About 5 years of investment is covered, obviously, because see, most of these electronics, like say a fab or a setup of a CMOS, design unit, take at least about 3 to 4 years for the entire setup to complete. So then in that case, the government has taken cognizance of that fact and given a coverage for about 5 years. So this is available for both existing industries as well as who are looking at expansion. Obviously, for an existing industry looking at expansion, the rules are slightly different. You need to show, what kind of what kind of sales that you are getting from the expansion, and the reimbursement is based on the sales that you are going to do. But for a new industry, it's slightly better. The reimbursement is based on what kind of plan that you are setting up, and what kind of machineries that you are pulling in, and what is the investment that is going on from your end. So you get about 25 to 35% of that reimbursed. Again, it's on a very case-to-case basis, but it's a very open policy. And like I said, it is for the ATMP pick and place units as well as for assemblies for fabrication units, the display fabs. I think this is basically the list of components that kind of suit these industries, and which the government has made, I would say, very a bird's eye view kind of list, because as you go deeper into this, you can dissect it, and there are a lot of components that we can look at. Again, depends a lot on what kind of background the entrepreneur is from, and for example, say if you are looking at component manufacturing. It's again a very you'll be playing in paisas in some extent, but then the volume is so huge that it makes sense to get into it. And also, since there are no prominent Indian players doing it as of today, there are a lot of small shops which are into it. Then it makes very good sense because you're also getting your cost of capital expenditure covered as well. That is in passive component manufacturing. With respect to PCBs, again, huge demand. China is a large player, mainly because of the one is the design flexibility that the Chinese companies give for any new, orders, and even for the MOQs are very low with these Chinese players as of today. And the turnaround time. It's very surprising that an Indian company having an office in many locations within India, it takes, as of today, on an average, about 20 to 25 days to get the entire PCB design, versus an order placed on a Chinese company and it takes just about 11 days. And this data is from the IESA itself. So that is where you can see the difference. So if something can be done to reduce the time, turnaround times, and also in terms of the prices at this speed of turnaround, it still works out about 20% cheaper to get it, including your logistics costs, to get it from China as of today. But the whole square peg in the round hole is government as of last year has put a restriction on the 7-layer and 14-layer PCB designs that can be imported into India, especially from China. So then it makes very good sense that obviously as of today people are bypassing this by getting the same Chinese PCBs into Vietnam and then importing it from Vietnam. But obviously there will be some curve from the customs end, and eventually this is going to stop. So this is something that is a big sector as well. In terms of communication equipments, defense is a sorry. Yeah. So in terms of communication equipments, again, there is another policy along with this policy, with this text policy, the defense sector, where we are looking at communication receivers from the defense sector, and this again has a Make in India mandate for the defense sector. So almost 90% of the component, if manufactured in India, then it's a sure shot entry into the defense and defense sector, where they are looking at satellite and communication receivers. Really sorry, he's joining. Okay. So I'll just go to the next slide, and then I will hand it over to so he'll be joining. Mr. 𝐒𝐲𝐥𝐿 will be joining very soon. So I'll be. This is where we are looking at in terms of where the global semiconductor industry lies in. Big player being Korea and obviously Taiwan, who hold most of the technology for this sector. And we are also looking at a lot of consolidation in this segment, wherein Broadcom has bought in a lot of Chinese companies, a lot of Singapore-based companies that have ST, or it could be again, there is a talk that there is going to be a huge merger between Broadcom and ST also, and Qualcomm, obviously, as you know, is now part of Broadcom as such with a new name. And this is where a lot of technology is now moving out of Taiwan and getting into new countries such as the Scandinavian countries, and also into the hands of American companies as well. So what this is making is, obviously, once the technology moves over to these countries, it is not completely feasible to manufacture these in these countries, and they would search for cheaper resources, countries where resources are cheaper, and try to move their manufacturing units from the existing, say, from, for example, from Taiwan or from Korea into the new countries where resources are cheaper. So that being the case, obviously India plays a big role there, and it becomes easier for these companies to kind of move it as fast as possible into India. Stop. Okay, I'm sorry. I got a request that the slide is not being shared. Johnny? I'll just share this.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone.
Yeah, good afternoon, Mr. Sanjay.
I'm extremely sorry, Guru sir. I got
no
there
worries.
was a network issue.
So because you said that there was a emergency in the last minute, so I've just walked the entire audience on the sector as such.
Okay.
What are the a very high level overview of what the specs is, and also I've talked about what kind of opportunities the sector as such presents to an entrepreneur. Maybe you can give a very
Sure. So,
brief introduction
have you run through those slides, first 12 slides?
Your voice is slightly feeble, I think.
No, have you presented this presentation?
Yeah, I am doing the presentation.
Okay, cool. Then what I will do, rather than presenting the slides, I will just give a very clear idea about electronics industry, about semiconductor industry, and
Right.
then I will come to specifically specs program.
Right.
Okay.
Maybe before you start, you can also briefly introduce yourself as well.
Yeah, so
I've
presentation
given a
anyway,
small introduction.
same slides were there, so I will not spend time on the slides.
Right.
For next 30 minutes, I will give you a very good overview about electronics industry, opportunities in this industry, as well as about the specs program, what it is, and how it is going to work. So, so good afternoon, everyone, and I'm sorry I'm late in joining because I was into some another meeting, and this meeting was not on calendar, so I somehow goofed up my calendar. So sorry for that, but. Next 30 minutes, I will present you about the India opportunity in electronics and component industry. And then if you have any questions, I will be very happy to answer those questions. So Guru sir might have given you quick intro about myself, but just to share with you, I spent 35 years in corporate career, and out of which 30 years in semiconductor industry. And I managed 5 American company as India MD, right from National Semiconductor, AMD, Motorola Freescale, PMC Sierra, and Aero Electronics. And for last 3 years, I am running my own consultancy firm to support Indian ecosystem of electronics as well as component manufacturing. So, what I want to share with you over next 20 to 30 minutes is about what is the opportunity today. You might be reading about semiconductor policy, Micron setting up ATMP plant in Gujarat, or Vedanta Foxconn deal has gone off. It has not worked out. So let me give you a background. Semiconductor is a heart of any electronics, and it contributes almost 25% share of any electronic product. Last year, total semiconductor market globally was around $550 billion, and that makes electronic market globally around $2.2 trillion. So 4x of semiconductor. And then if we look at the various reports for semiconductor, it talks about growth of almost $1 trillion by 2030. So by 2030, this $550 billion will become $1 trillion. And that means electronic market by 2030 will be $4 trillion plus. So it's a huge growth. Globally, we are going to witness quite a big growth into electronics and semiconductor industry. Now let's talk about India. Last year, India market was around $120 billion for electronics consumption. Out of that $120 billion, $40 billion was finished good import and $80 billion was manufactured in India. So, which is two-thirds of electronics is manufactured and one-third is finished good import. But the challenge for this industry in India today is all this manufacturing, what we are doing, is at a very low value addition. It is happening at 15% value addition, and with 15%, so slideshow we have stopped. I'm just going to speak about the industry, and I'm going to talk about the opportunities, and then if you have any questions, we will answer those Q&A. Okay, because Guru sir has already shared those slides, so I thought rather than sharing the slides, I will speak for the key points about the trends and opportunities. So coming back to my explanation, that out of $120 billion, $80 billion was manufactured in India and $40 billion was finished good import. And if you look at value addition in electronics, then this value addition is only 15%. What it means that in a $120 billion, actually India revenue recognition is only $12 billion. In a $80 billion manufacturing, we are recognizing 15%. That means $12 billion India gets. Means, you know, we heard Modi ji talking about $30 billion ke mobile phones we have exported. But ground reality is that mobile phones, our local value addition is only 10%. What we do, okay, yeah, we'll share those slides. We will email you all those slides. So we are getting complete CKD kit. Apple, Samsung, Oppo, Vivo, Xiaomi, Lava, Micromax, all these mobile phone guys, they import a complete kit to India and only do SMT assembly. And that SMT assembly gives only 10% value addition. And to get that 10% value addition, we are paying 4 to 6% incentive to these companies. So eventually in a $100 phone, India makes $10, then we pay $4 to $6 incentive. Finally, we make only $5. So this needs to be changed. Value addition in electronics has to be changed. Now let me explain you how a typical electronic product value addition works. 40% value of any electronics is into components. I told you initially 25% is semiconductor, 10% is passive, and 5% is bare PCB, on which we mount the component and solder the component. So that contributes 40%, 25% semiconductor, 10% passives connector cable, and 5% bare PCB. Now, unfortunately, what's happening that none of these components are manufactured in India today. Almost all, except maybe few capacitors or few PCBs, we import most of the 40% of the components. So we don't get a value recognition for components. Then the next value of 30 to 40% is into IP and technology. Now, when it comes to IP and technology, India has great talent. We have Intel, Qualcomm, ST Micro, Infineon, NXP Freescale, you name it. Top 30 semiconductor companies have their chip design activity in India. And we are doing all the next generation silicon from India design. Same way when it comes to electronics R&D, Cisco, Juniper, Bosch, Delphi, Continental, ABB, GE, Honeywell, you name it, all top electronics company, global companies, they have R&D in India. But we are getting only jobs. IP value get recognized to respective companies. Intel, Qualcomm or Bosch or Cisco, they get the IP value. India gets only jobs. Same case with design services company. Our services companies like Wipro, HCL, TCS, Infosys, Tech Mahindra, Tata Elxsi, L&T, all these people do global design, but they get jobs. IP value goes to their customer. So this is a big challenge because there are very few companies who are designing and manufacturing electronic products in India, like Tejas Network or Secure Meter or Genus. There are hardly 20 or 50 companies who are designing and manufacturing, big companies. But rest of the companies like Samsung is into consumer, LG is into consumer, they get complete kit from Korea and then they do only assembly work in India. So that's the big challenge, that we have talent, but that talent is working for global companies. We don't get IP value. We don't get component value. What we end up doing in electronics industry, only the electronics assembly work, what we called SMT assembly or electronics assembly. And that gives us only 10% value recognition. Plus few other components adds up to 5%. So now imagine this $120 billion industry, as per Ministry of Electronics report, is going to go to $300 billion by 2027. And if we continue at 15% value addition, then our value recognition by 27 will be less than $50 billion. And still $250 billion will go out of India. And this is a big challenge. So government has come up with semiconductor policy as well as specs program for passive component. So let me talk more about specs program later. First, let me give you a brief background about our semiconductor policy. It is a very interesting policy. They have three subsets to semiconductor policy. Firstly, it is a CMOS semiconductor where investments are $3 to $6 billion. Then there is a display policy where the investments are $1.4 billion up to $3 billion, where you manufacture LCD display, LED display, TFT display, smartphones, laptops, TV, your smartwatches, everything required display. And today we are importing 100% display. So there is a policy for display manufacturing. The third policy is for compound semiconductor. In compound semiconductor, we can have discrete semiconductors, RF, optoelectronics, sensors, photonics, as well as packaging. ATMP they call, or OSAT. That is nothing but packaging of wafers and then testing of those semiconductors. So this is the third policy, compound semiconductor. Now the good part is central government, Ministry of Electronics, is giving 50% incentive for all these three semiconductor policies: CMOS semiconductor, then display semiconductor, and compound semiconductor. Central government is giving 50% incentive and state governments are offering 20% incentive. So in all, if anyone is investing into semiconductor manufacturing or packaging, they will get 70% incentive from Government of India. You must have read Micron is setting up ATMP unit in Gujarat. It's a $2.8 billion project. And in that $2.8 billion, government is spending $2 billion. And Micron is investing only $800 million. So it is one of the best schemes across the world. No other country is offering 70% incentive for semiconductor wafer fab. And now there are a lot many companies, they are showing interest, and we hope with this support we will create wafer fabs and packaging units in India in next 3 to 4 years time. So that's about semiconductor. With this policy, we are expected to address that 25% of the semiconductor import. It may not address fully, but at least even if we address 5%, it will be a big value addition to Indian ecosystem. Now let's talk about passives and connectors and cables. In passives, on every PCB you will find capacitors, resistors, inductors, transformers, relays. There is no semiconductor or there is no active component inside this component, as well as your connectors which connects cables to the PCB or your cables. All those non-active components get categorized as passive component. Now, 10% of any electronics is passives. I told you initially. 40%, 25% semiconductor, 10% passives, 5% bare PCB. So now let's talk about this 10%, and I'm going to spend now more time on this specs policy. So in this 10%, there are variety of components which are used into all type of applications like telecom, automotive electronics, industrial electronics, or your medical electronics, consumer electronics. Everywhere these passive components are required to make an electronic circuit. Now imagine 10% value is into passives. When we will reach $300 billion by 2027, our passive requirement is going to be $30 billion, 30, which is huge. Okay. And today, out of that 10%, hardly 1% is manufactured in India or 2% is manufactured in India. So there is a big opportunity. And again, like semiconductor, we can't afford to import $30 billion worth of passive components. So what government has announced is called a specs policy. What is specs policy? If someone is investing, let's say, 100 crore rupees as a capex for setting up a passive component manufacturing, be it connector, be it capacitor, be it resistor, be it inductor, anything. So under specs program, Ministry of Electronics is giving 25% of capex incentive, capex investment as a reimbursement. So once you invest 100 crore and you show the invoice to the government that, hey, I have invested 100 crore rupees into buying equipments for passive component manufacturing, then you will get 25 crore from Government of India. 25% of the capex investment is covered under the specs program, but it is reimbursement. In semiconductor policy, it is an incentive, whereas in specs program, it is a reimbursement. Now, the good part about passive component is you can start transformer manufacturing or relay manufacturing. Even transformer can be made with an investment of 5 to 10 crore rupees. Okay. So if you are going to invest 10 crore rupees to set up a transformer factory, you will get 2.5 crore from Government of India under specs program. And only condition is you should get approval for your project before you invest. Don't invest before getting the approval. So once you have approval, then you invest, you show your receipt, you get a reimbursement. Now, in semiconductor, I told you it requires an investment of $3 to $6 billion. In compound semiconductor, investments required anywhere from 100 crore to $3 billion. But in passive component, you can set up a plant even with 5 crore rupees or 10 crore rupees, up to 500 crore rupees. Now the range is 5 crore to 500 crore for passive component, and you get 25% incentive. So this sector, why when I was talking to Guru sir as well as Prithvi, we thought we should be talking to you about specs program, because there can be many MSME companies who will be interested into participating in specs program, because investments thresholds are low, not like semiconductor, and number of components are huge. One can set up relay factory, one can set up capacitor factory, one can set up resistor, another guy can set up inductor, another can set up connector or cable or motors. There are I think 10,000 components which you can manufacture under the specs program with an investment from 5 crore to 500 crore. So it's a fantastic scheme, and we should be promoting to your potential customers that okay, such and such policy exists, and we can do handholding, we can get them technology partner, we can help them in forming JV partnership, and MSMEs can play a big role into this passive component opportunity. So that's about the specs program, that's about the electronics opportunity, and that's about the semiconductor opportunity. Now I will stop here. If you have any questions, I will be very happy to answer them. Guru sir, hope I have covered most of the key points.
Yes, yes, perfect. Also, some of the questions that we have got on our solution buggy, internal site is also that when you said that there are opportunities in the PCB market and also in the ATMP or OSAT. So if somebody is looking at PCB as such, so what kind of trends can he look at?
Okay. So, sir, ATMP OSAT comes under compound semiconductor policy, and there you can expect 70% incentive under ATMP OSAT. Recently, 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐬𝐻 has announced a ATMP facility in Telangana, or they are also going to set up in Mysore. Micron is coming in Gujarat. I already talked about it. Then there is a company called ASIP. They are also coming into Mysore. So in ATMP, CDIL, which is a Delhi-based company, they have announced discrete semiconductor ATMP. So in ATMP, it all depends on what type of packaging you are doing. See, wafer comes from semiconductor fabs like TSMC, UMC, Global Foundries, and then those wafers are getting packaged into plastic or ceramic. Those black color IC, what you see, those are actually manufacturing of packaging of semiconductor wafers to convert them wafers into IC, or convert wafers into transistor or a diode or a MOSFET. This process is called ATMP or OSAT. And investment for discrete semiconductor, you can even do at 100 crore rupees. For a QFN package or other complicated package, investments can go up to $1 billion. So it completely varies. But you have options to invest right from 100 crore up to $1 billion. Any
Right.
wafer manufacturing in India today? No. There is no wafer manufacturing in India today. Any opportunity for investment up to 10? No. There is no opportunity for 10 lakh to 20 lakh.
Right. Uh,
Mr. Saket here. Am I audible?
Yeah, just speak
Hi.
slightly loudly.
Yep. So thanks a lot, first of all, for this webinar. And coming back to my question, uh, apologies for that. Suppose we are setting up a plant for electronic manufacturing and say components and all. The biggest challenge what we are facing at the moment is the import duties and all. So is this spec policy will help us in any way to assist to reduce our burden on the import duties and all? And is there any other policy provided by Government of India to reduce the burden from GST and import perspective?
Okay.
Say I have a product XYZ and I have a raw material coming from China or say Taiwan, and is one of the crucial product which is getting manufactured there. We are importing, and for us the biggest challenge right now is the overhead from this custom duties and all, and nearly 30 to 40% of the burden is from that area. So is there anything which Government of India providing?
Okay.
Thank you for the
So in
question, but
this,
I would suggest
are
that
you?
the questions are typed into the chat because there will be otherwise a lot of people trying to talk at the same time.
Yeah. No, I heard about the import duty. The question. See, on the components, frankly, there is a zero duty today. Absolutely, all semiconductor, all passive components, there is a zero duty. Whereas when entering into how you identify which product? Okay, it's again a good question. I will come back to import duty question. It all depends upon the demand and supply. See, there are two types of manufacturing in electronics. One is a pure play third party EMS companies like Flextronic, Foxconn, Centum, or Keynes, or Vinyas, or SGS, Sirma, VVDN. All these companies do job work or turnkey project. Dixon, they do the manufacturing work for some other companies, whereas there are companies who have their own captive manufacturing plant. Now which segment to enter is completely depending on the opportunity you have. All segments in India are growing. Means it's not that from $120 billion when we are going to grow to $300 billion, only telecom is going to grow or only mobile phone is going to grow. All these segments are going to grow. So once you have the right technology partner, you can decide which sector to invest. Now coming back to the first question about
Something I want to add in here, along with
Yes.
Mr. Sanjeev's reply, is that see electronics. For example, if you look at consumer electronics, like how I was telling, companies like Boat, or it could be Mivi, and such players who, when they started off, didn't have any manufacturing unit of their own, right? So they were into completely these headsets or Bluetooth, headsets, and all the earphones and things like that. So they outsourced it to a lot of players, and these were small shops which are based in Noida and NCR region and things like that, who were basically getting a lot of components from China and other countries and just assembling it over here and white labeling it in the name of Boat or whichever company we are looking at. So in those cases, the biggest investment that these companies made was not into the technology part of it, but more or less into the marketing side, right? So, like how Mr. Sanjeev also mentioned, that where is the entrepreneur's, I would say, key capability in? Is it in marketing? Then he could look at D2C components or D2C kind of a market. Or is it in the technology aspect, where he could become contract manufacturer and he could take orders for these big companies and deliver it to them? In that case, his marketing spend is low, but investment on technology is high. So this has to be a very on a case-to-case basis, where you would have to sit with the entrepreneur, look at his mindset, what his previous experiences, and what is his intention to get into the electronic sector. Yeah, please go ahead, sir.
Yeah, I agree. So
So
to answer
one
the next
question,
question,
yes.
defense contributes only 6% of India market. So to manufacture components for defense sector only, if you are planning only for looking at India market, then it is not recommended. Unless you plan at a global scale, then only it will be making sense to go into defense sector. Mentor and design manufacturing is
Can we look at the availability of human resource? I think we have also spoken at length on this individually, that a
yes.
lot of skilled manpower is required. So where does an entrepreneur look at
Yeah.
getting the skilled manpower?
So everyone, sorry, today it was a mismanagement of my time, because this particular was not on my calendar, and I scheduled something other meeting. But what I request Guru sir to share my email ID and mobile number to all of you, or even on that presentation you can share, sir, to everyone, and my email ID and mobile number is mentioned. I'll be very happy. You call me anytime, and I'll be very happy to answer any questions you may have, or I will reply by email if you pose me any questions by email. But please excuse me today. I have to drop now for some other meeting.
Sure, sure. Thank you,
Okay,
Mr.
sorry,
Sanjeev.
gentlemen, but it was pleasure and honor to be with you. In 30 minutes, I tried to give you whatever best overview I can, but I am available one-on-one anytime. Please reach out to me.
Sure, sure, sure. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Bye.
Mr. Sanjay.
So I think the writing on the wall is pretty clear. You need to obviously get into electronics as a sector, then the investment ranges are much higher, at least to the tune of 5 crores and more. That is the first thing. Second thing is, if you are looking at an incentive policy from the government, then it is only for the sectors which are mentioned in the specs as of today. But again, having said that, and having worked on the ground with companies who are setting up units, there are very sector specific and state specific policies. Even the MSME department itself has a few policies which can be looked at. The better states, I would say, among the existing policies are Gujarat, Karnataka to some extent, and also Telangana has come up with very good policies as of today, and also UP as well. But if somebody is looking at the tune of investments of below 4 to 5 CR, then the again, like I said, it could be more into setting up of assembly units of these consumer electronics, and in those cases, it will be more or less like you will be manufacturing for some of these big players, or it could be a your own brand that you are looking at. Uh,
Hello, Guru Prasad.
yes,
Yeah, I have a question.
right,
So I actually have two questions. So if we have a budget for around like 10 to 15 CR,
right.
so what kind of in which segment the electronic business is possible, which has a scope of getting scaled up at a global level? If we first start domestically and then we want to go to the global level.
Right. So I think, like how Mr. Sanjeev said, there are the 3 or 4 sectors which we have also shown in the presentation, are looking at PCB sector as well. Obviously, with design levels of 7 and to the sector to the level of 14. So these are some of the PCBs manufacturing areas you can look at, or it could be even in the packaging of these semiconductor chips, slightly to the higher extent, and it could be also in being vendors to these fab units, like say units like Dixon, becoming a vendor to Dixon. So where you would be looking at passive components as well. When Mr. Sanjeev said passive components, we could be looking at resistors, capacitors, or on PCB transformers. So these are some of the things which we can look at.
Okay, okay. And yeah, one more question I have. So suppose in the hello, Guru Prasad.
I would suggest to kindly type the question, because sometimes it becomes very difficult to get the entire question when it's a longer question, because then it will be easier to read it. But this one you can go ahead, I think.
Yeah, yeah. So actually, my other question is that suppose we want to target the IP core design market in semiconductor. So what's the minimum investment required, and what type of markets we can target as for now to start with?
See, companies, I would say Indian companies who are currently doing IP for CMOS design or MOSFET designs and all are very few, like how Mr. Sanjeev also mentioned, like say Tejas Networks or Urja Networks, and very small players who have been in the business for the last 15 to 20, almost 10 to 15 years. So these are the ones who are having IP to these in semiconductor designs. But having said that, if you want to set up an entire unit for that, it is not like, because it is designed, right? So you will more than your physical infrastructure. Obviously, your physical infrastructure costs can range between 15 to 20 crores. But more than that, what I would suggest is having the right skill set development. And it is not like you will hire a few people and they will start developing your designs on day one, right? So obviously you will have to keep a large skill pool and a manpower ready for it, and it probably will take a longer time to set up the entire CMOS or MOSFET design team in India.
Okay. Thank you.
Right. Then I have a question. Okay. Okay. So there is a poll, I think. Maybe anybody who's interested can answer the same. Um, Are there any tax-free zones? See, again, tax-free zones are there in a few states, which can be looked at. And now what is happening is more than tax-free zones, it could be looked at something like zones where they are going to incentivize you to set up these plants. Because unlike other sectors, electronics is one sector where investments are very huge, and your I would say your ROI period is slightly longer compared to other sectors. Very much in lines with something like a pharma company, right? So you set up the plant, you have your fab or you have your design center set up, you hire the right people, and they do their R&D, and then the design starts coming out. So all these, give or take, should take at least about 1.5 to 2 years for you to stabilize in that sector. So more than tax incentives, because obviously all these years you're not making any money on it, so your profits are still very low. So you should be looking at areas where you get better incentives. Obviously, this specs program is across India because it's a central government scheme. But apart from that, what the local state governments are giving, so that is also something which will play a huge role. Uh, then margin. Okay. See, passive manufacturing as such, see, you can look at components like capacitors, which are on the board of on the PCB, or it could be in the resistors, which do not have any thinking, or I would say a logic working behind it, like what works in a typical chip, right? So there is no logic working in it. So in these cases, margins are in the range of 18 to 22%, give or take, and these are for the domestic consumption only. Okay. So I think we have had a good session today. Obviously, there were a few glitches. There are about two presentations which will be shared with you from my team, and then let me see if I have any other questions which I missed, or if any of you have any questions that you would like to ask, please let us know. Like Mr. Sanjeev said, if it's something very specific to what he spoke about, we can traverse it back to him and then get an answer from him. See, obviously, electronics is one sector where import has played a huge role, especially in consumer electronics, in toys, and also in high-end devices as well. The reason why there is a shift from the government's end and also from private players to get into this sector is to reduce the dependence on countries like China, and where things can go wrong, in terms of the border disputes and things like that. So this is one thing where government is very clear and promoting these I would say entrepreneurs in this sector. If you ask me today, is it going to be a more cheaper option? Like I mentioned in the case of the PCB design, Chinese developers can have a lower turnaround time as well as a lesser cost, 20% lesser cost as of today. So that is something that has to be looked at. But the policy eventually will stop imports from China. In fact, a lot of things have already stopped in, like I would say, pre-packaged chips, and also in terms of some of the passive components. There is going to be an import embargo. They will not stop the sun, but they will increase the import duties on it. So these are some of the things where eventually it will become more beneficial to manufacture in India than importing it. So if you, one more question from Mr. Indra, do we need to achieve a specific sales target? No, these are capital incentives, right? So whatever investments that you are making based on your project reports, as and when you are making these investments, you are going to get a reimbursement to the tune of 25 to 35%. So there is no sales targets involved as such, but obviously you will have to do the investment from your end in the first place, and then go for claiming the incentive. What percentage should be targeted at international exports? See, right now it is not an export-linked scheme. The idea behind this is if we can manufacture these electronic components here, and either you export it or it could be for the domestic sector itself. There is no differentiation in that. So obviously, if you are bringing in a lot more export also, then you get your import. You can claim it back when you are going to import anything, whatever duties that you're paying for the export. What would be the capex for putting up an SMT PCB line, and which are the industries to serve with such a production plant? Mr. Vivek, I think this I would not be able to answer it because I would not know the exact numbers. But I can run this question with Mr. Sanjeev and get the answer to this. If it is 100% tax on the passive and the local manufacturer. Yeah, so right now, Mr. Anvesh, this is the question which I was also answering, where import duties are going to be increased on these passive components. Some of them it's already been done, but eventually they will reach a stage where they will start putting in huge import duties on that. Where do we get know-how of manufacturing product? Obviously, you can reach out to my team, and then we can, like how Mr. Sanjeev said, we can have a one-on-one session and understand where the what kind of products that you can look at. What is the service? Okay. Right now, there are no wafer manufacturing companies in India. Future investments, like how we also read about a lot of players like Samsung and Foxconn trying to come in. But today, there is no, I would say, clear-cut understanding of who is going to put in the first investment. So I think it's been a splendid session today. Once again, apologize for the glitches that we had and the delay in having the expert onto the platform. We had a few questions that came in. I think I took time off to answer most of them, but in case I have left out a few questions, I do apologize for it. And I'm sure my team will run these questions back with Mr. Sanjeev, and he will give the response to it. Thank you once again for your time, and we would be happy to assist you with whatever questions you have, and also in terms of anybody wants to get into electronics as a sector. Do write into us, and my team will reach out to you, and we can have a one-on-one session with you. Thank you, sir. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Guruprasad.
Thank you.
Thank you.